The military component of the power differential with China is $450 billion year on year. Western Army commander, Southern Army commander, Northern Army commander, Eastern Army commander are all being tried for corruption.
But don't spoil for a fight with China. You build your strength, I bide your time. That is what the Chinese did 40 years ago. We should do it now.
When we talk about the Chinese rise, a large part of it goes because China doesn't have to go through the hurdles we have in Bhavan you spoke about. But also I would like to know a game which is fast evolving. Game is all about AI, data centers, chips. India, where is India there? Number one. Two, how good are Indian indigenous defense systems when chips are being exported either from China or be out to Singapore? Chinese chips out of Singapore on Operation Sindoor, what we saw happening with Pakistan after the Pahalgam terror attacks.
आप बात कर रहे थे इन ब्यूरोक्रेसी की. अरे हमारा ही creation, our cultural wisdom epitomized civil military fusion when it said Saraswati, Lakshmi or Durga Kamish. How brilliant! It said that create this R&D technology in your universities, use that to create wealth and talent, or talent will create wealth, Lakshmi, and some use some of that Lakshmi for Durga.
Now, what is civil-military fusion is something which Lieutenant General Raj Shukla has written a recent book about. And it talks about how the civilian aspect needs to be integrated with the military in order to take India to next heights of technology. But before we start with civil-military fusion, there is something which is very important, that is Operation Sindoor, what we saw happening with Pakistan after the Pahalgam terror attacks. Nitin sir, I'll start with you. How do you see Operation Sindoor different from what we had skirmishes with Pakistan in the past? Especially, we saw Balakot.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me here and also giving me the stage with my friend General Raj Shukla. Now, the point here is Operation Sindoor is different in many ways from what the previous encounters or skirmishes that we had with Pakistan post-1971. Kargil was a localized conflict in a particular zone. Then we had a Uri surgical strikes post-Uri attack. Then we had Balakot airstrike on a particular camp. But Operation Sindoor was a first of its kind operation where some of the red lines in the minds as well as in amongst the decision makers were crossed. Red lines which were imposed in a way by Pakistan's clever propaganda that we are a nuclear power. If you touch Pakistan, Punjab, if you attack headquarters of, say, Jaish-e-Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Toiba, then there will be hell to pay. There you'll have a lot of this nuclear dimension coming in. But all that was, that nuclear bluff was called by India. And more importantly, the use of force was demonstrated in statecraft. अगर पहले क्या होता था कि 2008 के हमले के बाद भी मुंबई में जो हमला हुआ, जब ये ऑप्शन मिलिट्री ने दिया था कि हम भावलपुर पे अटैक कर सकते हैं, प्रिसाइज अटैक, वो ऑप्शन नहीं लिया गया था. क्यों नहीं लिया गया था? क्योंकि डर ये था सबके मन में, प्रधानमंत्री से लेकर बाकी सबके मन में, कि कहीं पाकिस्तान न्यूक्लियर हथियार यूज़ न कर लें. और फिर बाकी लोगों का डर था, अमेरिका उसमें आता था. तो ये निर्णय लेना ये बहुत बड़ी बात होती है कि जहाँ पे रिस्क होता है और जहाँ पे पाकिस्तान इतनी धमकी देते रहता है कि हम न्यूक्लियर हथियारों को इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, उसके बावजूद स्टैंड ऑफ वेपन्स का इस्तेमाल करके जितने आतंकवादी ठिकाने थे, हेडक्वार्टर्स थे, उनको निशाना बनाना और बाद में फिर मई 10 को या 11 को सुबह उनके एयरफील्ड्स पे हमला करना, उसको डिस्ट्रॉय करना, जबकि इतना प्रेशर था दुनिया से और बाकी अन्य देशों से कि ऐसा नहीं करें, इसको एस्केलेट नहीं करें. तो मैं समझता हूँ कि ये एक थ्रेशोल्ड जो है वो क्रॉस किया गया है और इसीलिए ऑपरेशन सिंदूर बहुत अलग है. और मैं समझता हूँ कि इसमें कई सारे लेसन्स भारत ने अपने लिए और दुनिया के लिए कायम किए हैं.
Sir, talking about lessons, there were some glaring gaps which we talk about in security community. If you could just tell us what those glaring gaps were in the Operation Sindoor, especially the first day we saw some gaps of them coming.
So, before I come to the gaps, just let me say a word about Operation Sindoor, why it was so significant. If you see, as 2025 wound up, there is one Lowy Institute in the Asian Power Index. India was ranked at number 3 behind USA and China. So while USA were described as superpowers, USA and China, India was described as a major power. And this is a comprehensive measure of our power. I make this point that while we keep touting the fact that we are the 4th largest economy, why do we forget that we are the 3rd most important power? Operation Sindoor was a way of, showing to the world that our power matters. As Nitin said, why do we have a $90 billion military? It's just not for restraint. When you threaten our sovereignty or our territorial integrity, we will respond. And on the 10th of May, whatever Pakistan may say, their J-10s, their J-70s was scampering backwards. They couldn't fly. It was a real overwhelming military victory. Now we should take that forward in some sense. You see what Trump has done to Maduro yesterday. So one day we should get the DGISI here and try him for terror.
Even
all the
Yunus
stuff that he's doing. And I'm not saying it in a jingoistic manner. I'm saying you build calibrated capacities and one day we should be able to do that. So I think in that sense of Sindoor, as Nitin said, we called the nuclear bluff. We began to punch in accord with our strategic weight. But we can do far more when you threaten us. Otherwise, we are pretty happy with focusing on our economic prosperity, so on and so forth. Having said that, now that you asked me what about the gaps in Sindoor, I look at it this way and I'll be very interested in hearing what Nitin has to say. See, apart from the many good things that happened, one issue that we should focus on, not bother about, but we have to look at, is how BVR combat, what you say, beyond visual range combat, has stalemated. Both the opposing air forces could not close in. Now that has implications for the future. If you are to operate in what I call this contested envelope, you need stealth. And there are great difficulties in getting stealth. We know there are problems with the F-35, Su-57 and so on and so forth. So we must now switch in air power from our over-reliance on piloted air power to other complementary options. And those complementary options are dronery, which you are seeing in Ukraine. This whole business of a drone missile force. So these are some capacities we need to develop and we can do it very well. So I make this overall argument that we must create these lethal frontiers of dronery along our LAC and LC. It can be done. It gives ground commanders the options right from close air support, favorable air situation to strategic air power. Look at what drones did in Valdai. 3,500 kilometers and they almost threatened Putin. So dronery is one part and we must link it to what the Prime Minister said the other day, which is the Sudarshan Chakra, which is this, shall I say, assembly of a very strong AD system. You need it. Look at Venezuela. Offensive strike, drone missile force. But none of this is happening unless you soak them in what I call fourth industrial revolution technologies. और ये सब अभी फ्यूचर की बात नहीं है, ये हो रही हैं. यूक्रेन में कल का जो ऑपरेशन था, you look at the readout, it says it's a land, maritime and space mission which was executed. So these three things we'll have to do. And one last point I want to make is that so far we have focused on territorial defense, LC, LAC. Now we have to look at homeland security in this larger sense of air defense, drone missile force, laced with these technologies. And we have to do it fast because if, India's rise is going to be challenged. So to secure that rise, we have to do all this. Op Sindoor we did very well, but we can never rest on our laurels. So ये 3-4 चीजें अगर हम करें, तो भारत will become, जिसे कहते हैं, सुरक्षित और सुदृढ़.
Thank you. Nitin, I would like to know your perspective on the same, but I would also like to understand when we talk about combat with Pakistan. Obviously, from 1999 till what we have seen today, there is a sea change of combat, and yes, this stalemate of air powers, which is binding them from crossing LACs more. This superfluous technology and dependence on technology. Where are we on that today? And how quickly do you think India is going to rank up to that kind of demand, which is really the future of warfare and also of your own internal defense?
I think one thing is very clear that technology is going to be the driver of any defense policy or any military doctrines or practice that India is going to do or any other country is going to do. And on that front, for the last 10 years or so, when this government came to power, one of the big things that they did, in my view, one of the reforms was to concentrate on Make in India, what now is called Atmanirbharta. Because without your own technology or without your own capability to use technology may be from outside, but to have search capacity, drones banana, counter drones banana, radars, AI, quantum, all of these things, unless you have your own capability, you're not going to be a power to reckon with. क्योंकि अगर आप किसी के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट रहते हो, अगर टेक्नोलॉजी बाहर से लाते हैं और वो अगर स्विच ऑफ कर दें टेक्नोलॉजी ड्यूरिंग क्राइसिस, then you are in trouble. Therefore, I think the trend, which is positive, should be surged. The government should make more effort and more focused attention to developing capabilities within India of Indian companies, of Indian innovators, of Indian technologists. IITs are already, concentrating and cooperating with the military. So are innovators. Private industry is also putting in some money. It needs to do more. Everyone needs to do more if you have to become self-reliant. And that is something that every big power is. You look at any of the big military powers, unless you are self-reliant, unless you are self-sufficient, you are not going to be a big military power. तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है, बड़ा मामला है और इसी के ऊपर काम काफ़ी हो रहा है. DRDO अभी काफ़ी एक्टिव हो गई है, मिसाइल्स हम अपने बना रहे हैं. उसी तरह से हर हथियार हमारे यहाँ होना चाहिए जो बहुत ही ज़्यादा टेक्नोलॉजिकली एडवांस्ड है. शायद उसमें समय लगेगा, पर जो अभी हो रहा है वो मेरे ख्याल से पॉजिटिव है.
Sir, he talked about make in India. I'm going to wear a critical hat and I'm going to ask you that, from last 10 years, we've been hearing about Make in India. But if you look at our Air Force, given the size of our economy and our military power where it is, we are still horribly short of numbers. One, two, I would say since last 40 years, despite us trying to indigenize our own fighter jets, we are still at a stage where we are still talking about either F-35s or the Su-57s. When is India going to see that leap where they don't have to depend either on the Russians or on the Americans, but the AMCA we are talking about? Now, the timelines which are giving on AMCA, the technology is changing so fast that by the time this AMCA gets integrated into Indian Air Force, something new would have come out as Generation 6 or Generation 7 would already be there. So why is it that we are still playing the catch-up technique here? And how can we literally leap forward and, kind of miss those steps so we can, not only catch up, but leap forward and move ahead of them?
So if you look at the global military landscape, it is transforming with a capital T. India has started doing a lot of good stuff, but we are still not transforming. So let me give you 2 to 3 examples. आप देखिए, look at our procurement. India में still the wisdom is of procurement is that we will go by L1. UK and USA have thrown L1 out of the window. If you are in the general staff, a military officer in UK, USA, or a bureaucrat in the procurement bureaucracy, your ACR will no longer be written by your expertise at saving government money. I mean, that is one of the factors. But what are the overriding factors? Lethality, outcomes, deliveries in timelines. Now, this is music to my ears. हमको हमेशा बताया गया कि भाई यहाँ ये नहीं हो सकता. बाहर हो रहा है, UK, USA में हो रहा है. They've reformed it. What are the timelines? आपने बात की AMCA 15 years. This is what we have to see. Andrew Palmer lucky Anduril ka jo, he's a very good military tech, deep tech entrepreneur. He says you either build a fighter aircraft in 4 years or you're not going to build it in 15. We have to look at it. Wahan pe the procurement bureaucracies mein they have brought in that these big platforms, you either get them in 3, the project is scrapped. ये हर साल extension, 2 साल ये वो. जो मॉड्यूलर प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं उसके लिए 1 साल की मोहलत है और जो एआई और सॉफ्टवेयर है वो 3 महीने. यहाँ पे आपको स्टार्टअप्स बताएंगे साहब मेरे को ऑर्डर आई वाज डिक्लेयर्ड द बेस्ट स्टार्टअप इन 2022 एंड आई गॉट द फर्स्ट ऑर्डर फ्रॉम एमओडी इन 2026. तब तक तो एआई का खेल बदली हो चुका है. नाउ व्हाई आई एम मेकिंग दिस क्रिटिक इज आई एग्री एंटायरली विद नितिन कि आत्मनिर्भरता एंड डिफेंस, बट if you now ask me about AMCA and why we are not doing this, you have to do these big changes. Absolute sweeping changes. मैं आपको और बड़ी मिसालें दे सकता हूं. मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि when will this whole scene change? When will I stop quoting in response to your question? से देखो अमेरिका ने ये कर दिया, यूके ने ये कर दिया, यूक्रेन ने ये कर दिया, अब हम करेंगे. Why can't we set the pace? We have the brains, we have the talent. So as you know, many people, the Raksha Mantri, Prime Minister have been saying reform to transform. So it has to be transformation with a capital T. So I'm saying that we have taken good first steps, but given the kind of competition, procurement में, मैं आपको एक और देता हूँ. National security today needs high quality talent. So what has America done? Det 201, 4 months back. They have picked the chief technical officers of companies like Shyam Shankar, Andrew Boswell, bade known names, top technology minds, CTOs of the major startups like Scale AI, Anduril. They have inducted them as lieutenant colonels and colonels in the army. Why? Because the army said, sir, we can't share data with civilians. तो उन्होंने कहा चलो ये आ गए, ये इनकी रैंक है, नाउ गिव देम द ऑप्स रूम्स एंड दे विल डू टेक्नोलॉजी स्टफ. अब सी व्हाट दे हैव स्टार्टेड डूइंग. देयर फर्स्ट टास्क गिवन टू देम वाज बाय प्रेसिडेंट ट्रम्प कि व्हाई एम आई स्पेंडिंग $1 trillion and losing every war? There is fluff in my budget. So they picked up the external fin of the fuel tank of the Black Hawk helicopter. And to their horror, because they were the technology minds, they discovered कि भाई the American military was paying $144,000 for one piece. Since these were these technology minds, उन्होंने उसको reverse engineer किया, 3D print किया, 44 दिन में document sign कर दिया कि this we will give you this piece for $3,000. India में our engineers are, I'm a very proud army man. We have the core of EME, signals. They are all regulating. DGQA is told by इन चीजों में गलतियां ढूंढ लो. We have to change to innovation. So I can give you hundreds of examples. So I'm saying India is doing very well, but we can do far better because the whole game of national security is transforming. So I'm saying transformation with a capital T. If we do that, what will be our end result? आप पाकिस्तान की बात कर रहे थे. मैं तो ये पूछता हूँ यार पाकिस्तान की चर्चा क्यों होती है? Pakistan's economy is smaller than the GDP of Bombay. We should have combat overmatch with Pakistan. हमारे पास इतनी काबिलियत होनी चाहिए कि ये DGISI ने कुछ किया, उसको जैसे कल उठाया मडूरो को उठा के यहाँ ले आओ. This is what India should be. And we can do it. The day we have such capacities, what I call combat overmatch, Pakistan ये सारी हरकतें बंद कर देगा. So, and with China, it has to be more sensible, it has to be technological innovation based. Asymmetric deterrence, उसके बाद में अलग से बात करें.
Nitin, when we talk about, China, and that is the elephant in the room, which none of the Indian media usually speaks about. We don't even discuss it enough. Pakistan is talked day in and day out. हम पाकिस्तान पे रोज सुबह से रात तक बात करते हैं. But मुझे ये लगता है कि जो elephant in the room है वो China है. When we see at the Chinese and when we assess threats from the Chinese, see, personally, I think that when Operation Sindhur happened, because Pakistan military, 85% of the equipment is the Chinese equipment. How big is the Chinese threat in military terms to India? And where do you see that, if tomorrow anything like Galwan happens again with China, and, then how do you see the Indian response going towards China?
Well, so let me first sort of qualify your statement that we don't give enough attention to China. At least in my own practice of journalism, at least from 2011, I have only concentrated on China.
Yeah, you are an exception onto that. That is why I came to you.
So basically, I think in my view, Pakistan is a subset of the China challenge. First of all, our primary adversary, and to the credit of the military, it started looking at China as a primary adversary in the start of the last decade, in the early 2010s, 11, that kind of thing. And let me, ये audience के लिए एक किस्सा सुनाता हूँ पाकिस्तानियों का. हम ज़्यादा पाकिस्तान से ऑब्सेस रहते थे. अभी ये सिंदूर के बाद और अब धुरंधर के बाद फिर ऑब्सेस होने लग गए हैं. पर पाकिस्तानियों का इंडिया के बारे में जो ऑब्सेशन है वो आई जस्ट वांट टू गिव देम एन एनेक्डोट एंड देन मूव ऑन टू चाइना. 2013 में मैं जनवरी में पाकिस्तान के कुछ थिंक टैंक के लोगों के साथ दुबई में एक ट्रैक टूर करने के लिए गया था. नजम सेठी जो फेमस जर्नलिस्ट हैं और 2 रिसेंटली रिटायर्ड पाकिस्तानी ब्रिगेडियर्स वे पार्ट ऑफ द पाकिस्तानी डेलीगेशन एंड हमारे तरफ से मैं था और 2 थिंक टैंक के यंग रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स वे देयर. तो हम बात कर रहे थे कि कैन द 2 मिलिट्रीज इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान मिलिट्रीज हैव CBMs और ये किसी अमेरिकन थिंक टैंक ने इसको ऑर्गेनाइज किया था दुबई में. तो ड्यूरिंग द कोर्स ऑफ माई प्रेजेंटेशन विच वॉज द सेकेंड लास्ट बिफोर नजम सेठी वॉज टू स्पीक, मैंने बोलते बोलते ये कहा कि इंडियन मिलिट्री हैज स्टार्टेड रीओरिएंटिंग इटसेल्फ टुवर्ड्स द नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर्स टुवर्ड्स चाइना. They know how to deal with Pakistan. We have defeated, Indian military has defeated Pakistan 4 times comprehensively. 93,000 have surrendered in 71. Kargil में हमने ज़मीन वापस ले ली, सब कुछ कर लिया. तो Pakistan is like a monkey on our back. It's a nuisance. And our main challenge comes from China. तो वो recently retired brigadier जो था वो खड़ा हो गया मेरे presentation के बीच में. जैसे अभी हम बात कर रहे हैं, कोई खड़ा हो गया वहाँ पे और वो बोलने लग गया कि wait, हम आपके 1 नंबर के दुश्मन हैं, चाइना नहीं है. तो उसको एक वो फोमो हो जाता है, फियर ऑफ मिसिंग आउट, कि अरे हमको दुश्मन नहीं मान रहे हैं, हम कुछ भी नहीं है उनके सामने. सो दैट इज पाकिस्तान एंड आई थिंक वी ऑल शुड ट्रीट पाकिस्तान लाइक दैट. इट्स अ स्मॉल country with no economy, yes, some military power, and of course a nuisance value. But our primary challenge comes from China. You asked me about what will happen if another Galwan was to happen. See, even in Galwan, India always had, Indian military, Indian army always had the ability to Indian interests and Indian territory. We have still not got to the stage where we can take an offensive action against or a proactive action. We can do a quid pro quo, as they say, as they did in Kailash range operations in August 2020. But मैं समझता हूँ कि because अब चाइना की तरफ फोकस सभी का आ गया है, सिटीजन्स का भी आना चाहिए कि हमारा मेन दुश्मन चाइना है, पाकिस्तान नहीं है. अगर ये आता है और जो गवर्नमेंट में आ गया है जो दिस काइंड ऑफ अ रियलाइजेशन, आई थिंक वी हैव डन मल्टीपल थिंग्स इन द लास्ट 6 years or 5 years after Galwan. We have built our infrastructure, we have reoriented our arming of the military. All that has been done. And I think we are getting there. There is no point in looking for, spoiling for a fight with China. Like Raj said, China is the bigger challenge, but technology can make us so strong that China will think twice. And China will think twice even today about attacking India. They want to win without fighting. And that we should be aware of. Therefore, have our defenses, have our options ready, but don't spoil for a fight with China. You build your strength, bide your time. That is what the Chinese did 40 years ago. We should do it now and do it quickly.
Sir, coming to China, you have extensively compared China and its military might, the rise of its military might in your book. Now, when we talk about the Chinese rise, a large part of it goes because China doesn't have to go through the bureaucratic hurdles what we see we have in our country, number one, which you spoke about. But also, I would like to know, in this game which is very fastly evolving in warfare, the game is all about AI, data centers, chips. India, where is India there, number one? How good are Indian indigenous defense systems when the chips are still being exported either from China or being rerouted through Singapore, essentially the same Chinese chips with a stamp of Singapore onto it. How effective can we be against China when push comes to shove in that?
So see, before I come to the technology piece, just a few comments. In India's strategic calculus, I see Pakistan as the pest and China as the threat. So it is a threat, but what kind of threat is it? China has a whole lot of problems. Apart from Galwan, when we really showed them their place, you look at Kailash, they knew what the Indian army could do. Between Galwan and the recent cooling of tensions, there are a number of incidents where we... So I'm saying man to man along the LAC, we have stood by them. And they know it more than anybody else. The second point is that if you actually ask me in strategic military terms, the Chinese are 5 feet tall. And biologically, that's what they are. But what they do, and which must give them credit, they become 8 feet tall. And what we don't do when we make some excuses, and one of them is what you pointed out, is bureaucratic delays, we made them 10 feet tall. But China is only 5 feet tall. It can be stood up to. Now, what should we do? Where China has done well and where we need to, endeavor very seriously to get the better of them. Before that, see, they have huge problems. Can you tell me an army in the world where 70% of their generals had been sacked in the last 1 year?
I only remember Stalin during World War II.
Now it's China. So it's like saying that in the Indian context, Western Army Commander, Southern Army Commander, Northern Army Commander, Eastern Army Commander are all being tried for corruption. So they have huge problems in that sense. But one area where they have done well, and we must acknowledge, is capacity building and technology. They have really changed the game in capacity building and technology. So my argument is that with China, let me draw an example from Ukraine. Ukraine, a country without an air force or a navy, just let that get, without an air force or a navy, on the back of technological innovation and what I call civil-military fusion, has held one of the world's most powerful military at bay for 4 years. See, it's very complex. I can have S-400, S-500, but S-400, S-500 can be overwhelmed by drones, swarm of drones. This is what the Ukrainians have done. So what they have done in Ukraine is by using all these technologies, AI, quantum, robotics, 3D printing, in their military created what is asymmetric innovation. Now look at our reality with China. The military component of the power differential with China is $450 billion year on year. Ab wo ek hakikat hai. But there is a lot we can do which is budget agnostic. Theatre commands don't need a penny. Why haven't we formed them? Civil military fusion we can do. And a lot of technology stuff. So I'm saying if we do all this, we can asymmetrically deter China. And China is not an illogical player. It knows India's size. It knows other factors. It will not challenge us militarily unless we don't take action and these weaknesses don't get covered up. And technology is one huge space. See what's happened today. You forget what is happening in technology. I'll tell you the outcomes of technology. In Ukraine today, along a distance of 1,000 kilometers, if the adversary artillery moves, if the adversary tank moves, or if the adversary infantry now moves, within 6 minutes, it is targeted with drones. 6 minutes. Compressed kill chains, all on the back of AI, faster decision making, all this kind of stuff. With robotics, today, China in their ammunition factories has a surge capacity of 10,000 cruise missiles a week. The Americans can't make 10,000 cruise missiles in 3 years. So this is what technology is doing. So my whole argument is that on the back of technological innovation and structural, cultural changes like civil military fusion, we can easily deter China. But we have to do that stuff. आप बात कर रहे थे Indian bureaucracy की. अरे ये हमारा ही creation है. Our cultural wisdom epitomized civil military fusion when it said Saraswati, Lakshmi or Durga Commissioner. How brilliant. It said that, create this R&D technology in your universities, use that to create wealth and talent, or talent will create wealth, Lakshmi, and some use some of that Lakshmi for Durga. Why did we abandon our civilizational wisdom? And why does the West and China now have to teach us civil military fusion? So these are it is all common sense. So what Indian national security today needs, see, national security today lies at the intersect of economic productivity, technological prowess and strategic military heft. It is not one or two of them. All three have to come together. And that is what this rising India can do. We have so many of these young minds here. Nitin pointed out IIT and all that. That is the big challenge. So my whole thesis is that yes, there are challenges, but there are enough pathways to overcome those challenges. We need to act, and in that sense, I think India's rise is unstoppable. We have to act. We can't just sit on our haunches.
The rise is inevitable, but there are hurdles which should be overcome.
And these hurdles, Nitin, I want to move beyond the technology. And I want to come, when you look at the big four powers, it's, US, Russia, China, and then India. And every global power in India is, aspiring to be a global power, by 2047. You have these spheres of influence, what we saw with the US doing yesterday in Venezuela. The problem with India and China is that these both countries, unlike Russia and America, who have a huge distance, geographical distance, we are each other's neighbors. So how do you see that we are going to manage, or we are going to compete this sphere of influence without, having a very frequent clash, whether it is through Pakistan or through, Myanmar is another thing. Bangladesh is building up. How do you see this sphere of influence, India tightening its sphere of influence?
Well, I think that sphere of influence debate has got reignited because what the national security strategy of US has spoken about, that trying to get primacy back in Western Hemisphere. And yesterday what happened in Venezuela is one example or one demonstration of that. And you have to give it to the American military that it is still, one of the best in terms of size, in terms of execution. As far as India is concerned, I have one, different thought about sphere of influence. Sphere of influence in the last, 30 years or so, have got eroded. Every big power has seen erosion in their sphere of influence. Take the Americans, forget Venezuela, which has happened yesterday. But for last 30 years, everybody else in Latin America, Canada, have challenged them. And they've been worried about it, so Trump is trying to undo that. Look at Russia. In Central Asia, it was a preeminent power, but it has lost to or is competing with China there. Look at Pacific. It used to be Australia's backyard, the Pacific Island nations. But today, China is competing with them. Something similar has happened in what we call Indian subcontinent, others fashionably call it South Asia. Chinese have made inroads, there's no doubt about that. But it's a game that you have to play continuously and in a nimble-footed manner. So I give that example of Maldives, for instance. 2013 to 18, Maldives was a pro-China government. 2018 to 23 was a completely pro-India government. 2023, a fellow who came on the back of India Out campaign and was out and out an India opponent. But within 1.5 years, he's come back to India asking for help. Something similar happened in Sri Lanka. They were in the Chinese pocket, but they saw the heft of geography, if I may say so. And India is back in Sri Lanka, helping them at the drop of a hat of everything that happens. Nepal, again, we've seen erratic presence of India and the Chinese alternately. So this is a game which has to be played continuously. Let's not get too bogged down about it. China will try to enter our sphere of influence. We should also do what I call reverse string of pearls. Go to Mongolia, have a chat, have a good relations with them militarily and otherwise. Arm Vietnam, arm Philippines, as we are doing with BrahMos and others. Go to Indonesia, do a reverse string of pearls. Chinese are not, like Raj said, they're not 10 feet tall. They are equally vulnerable to many, weaknesses. So we should play on their weakness, build our strength, and not bother too much about what's happening around. That we can always manage. We are a big country, we are a big population, we are a big technology prowess, and a great military. In whatever terms you examine the Indian military, it's a great military. So I think this sphere of influence debate, in my view, is largely a matter of how you exercise power, and you have to be willing to exercise power. That is the key part of any sphere of influence control that any nation can have.
Sir, so coming back to China, During Operation Sindoor, we saw that the Chinese were the ones who were providing information to the Pakistanis through their own satellites. But we, on the other end, despite ISRO being where it is today, have still not been able to reach those LEOs or get into that game yet. Do you think that it is time for us to bring it to the private players, or do you think that ISRO has the capacity and the capability to take the space sector and
See, if you see the evolving security architectures, they are three topologies. One is what you pointed out. So let's take Israel. Israel's ability to take out Nasrullah or to hit the Iranians in the manner in which it did in Rising Lion did not happen just because of the platforms. It happened because of all these wraparound technology, space, cyber, EW. So the game in national security is shifting from platforms, not only platforms, but also wraparound technology. Here, India has been a little slow to embrace these wraparound technologies. So let me give you talk of space. The biggest mistake the Indian military makes is when it thinks that ISRO will give it military capacities in space. ISRO is not designed to do so. ISRO is for exploration. Shubhangu Shukla, man on the moon. Military capacities in space will come from Starlink, SpaceX. So it will come not from ISRO, but from any other body. Now, which is that other body? Global evidence suggests in the last 6 to say 8 years, all capacities in space are coming from startups, private sector. Now we have made that swing, but again our swing is not, accelerated enough. India में there are 10 startups, brilliant talent in space, who are just looking for orders. वो हमारी bureaucracy में file घूमे जा रही हैं.
Otherwise, they get bought over by US companies.
Exactly. So there is no dearth of talent, but this stuff. And look how this game is expanding. Today, LEO, low Earth orbit, is not only a national security opportunity, it's a business layer. आप उसमें invest करें, पैसा भी आएगा और security भी आएगी. Similarly, the HEO, I can give you examples by the dozen. What these startups need is orders, because once the orders come, the VCs are waiting behind. अगर इनको order मिला और पैसा आएगा. And once that market is created for space, you will not talk of ISRO next. ये अपने आप पैसा करेंगे, security भी आएगी और business भी आएगा. And there is enough pointers that today the partner of US Spacecom is not Boeing, not Lockheed, not NASA, it's Elon Musk. And across the globe these answers are. The British have appointed a private sector guy, Pierce Russo, to fix their military industrial complex. In our case, it's like appointing Mr. Kalyani to fix the military industrial complex. So these are so many of these things which can be done. And the fact that they are happening around the globe is because they have reached these decisions after years of frustrations. Why don't we make this civil once and for all? Today, the ratio of PSUs to private sector in India is 77-23. It should be the other way around. It should be 80% private sector and 20% PSUs in some very high-grade niche technologies. LEO is not high-grade. वो तो आम चीज़ है. These startups will do it for you. So that's why I began by saying, you know what, we are in a very good space provided we can do that transformation with a capital T. हम transformation कर रहे हैं छोटा T के साथ. We should do it with a capital T.
So, sir, how do you then see the IDEX platform? Do you see that it is justifying its role in the larger scheme of?
Well, it does justify, but it needs follow-up. IDEX is a good beginning, first step, but the ladder is much higher. And to go up the ladder, like Raj said, you need hand-holding, you need orders, you need money to circulate. That, I think, becomes a big hurdle for innovators and startups. They're not business people. They are innovators. They are inventors. They need hand-holding. Now, that hand-holding has to come from the government, at least in the beginning, first 5-10 years. Only then, they'll become what SpaceX is today or what Lockheed Martin is. They all started with complete support of the governments. There is a book called Freedom's Forge, in 1941, when all these private companies were automotive companies, they were called by the President of America when they joined the war, Second World War, and said, I need you to build ships, aircraft, submarines, and trucks. And they did. They built something like 300,000, armaments and various platforms in 2 years. They were Boeing and General Motors. General Motors manager came, like Raj said, can we not get Baba Kalyani to advise the government and say, okay, this is what we'll do for surge capacity. But we don't have that mindset at the moment, but we'll have to do it.
Sir, I want to ask you something. One thing about, and I'm coming back to Operation Sindoor, one thing about Indian military is that we have done extremely well. But somehow when it comes to strategic communication, that is somewhere the space where we are extremely lacking. Why is it so, and how are we going to close that gap in the next phase?
Yeah, so see, you're absolutely right. I cannot think any other example of such a overwhelming military success being ruined at the altar of poor strategic communication. I happened to be in Washington in the same week that Trump was launching Asim Munir. And to my horror, Asim Munir was not only being launched by Trump, he was the toast of Washington. Every newspaper was calling him, all media platforms, all embassies, and we were just absent from the space because we have not taken strategic communication seriously. So what should we do? Again, it goes back to civil-military fusion. It's not that I'm flattering Nitin, but somebody of his expertise in this domain, either in the office of the CDS or say we create a DG strategic communications, he should be his advisor. Or he should be, say, why can't we have a deputy NSA strategic communications where we utilize him? Strategic communications is not just getting press gaggle one fine day and answering 40 questions. It is building the narrative. It has to be ideation, action and narration. Saath build karna padega. See, I'm always accused of giving Chinese examples, but somehow they do things well. So let me give you one Chinese example. 100 or say 80, 90 years back, they built this narrative. To their military men, to their bureaucracies, to their politicians, it was 100-year marathon. 100 साल में USA को हराना है. अभी 100 साल हो रहे हैं, at least technologically, economically, they are par. But to the world, it was peaceful rise. बेवकूफ बना रहे थे. Peaceful rise. It is a sophisticated game. The narrative has to thought through. It has to be the idea of one man, Nitin or anybody else. और उसको आपको समझाना है लोगों को day-to-day basis. It has to be taken down to the people, to the stakeholders. And it is so important as we saw in Sindhur. So if you ask me, DG Stratcom should have been created in the week following Sindhur. But वो अभी नहीं हुआ, अभी भी नहीं किया हमने. So strategic communications is a weakness, and as I make this, the common understanding is strategic communication क्या है सर? वो एक press conference करनी है, वो 4 journalists को बुला लो, ऐसे थोड़ी ना होता है. It has to be thought through, it has to be debated. How are you going to, I was watching your last discussion. I mean, there is a great sophistication in social media platforms. Audiences, क्या sell करते हो आप? Hindi speaking world में एक अलग कहानी, English speaking world में अलग कहानी, all that. So strategic communications is what we need. And especially now, now that we are the 4th largest economy, 3rd. In 2026, if we can do 2 things, I'll be such a pleased man. एक theatre command बना दो, एक DG Stratcom बना.
2, it has to be done, let's say Operation Sindoor itself. It has to be done before Operation Sindoor started, during Operation Sindoor, after Operation Sindoor. It's a continuous process. But we don't do that. We do it in fits and starts. So that will never work. It has to be it has to be a command function. That means it has to be inbuilt in your operational planning. When you are doing a kinetic operations planning, narrative building or narrative warfare, cognitive warfare has to be inbuilt in the planning stage itself, so that then you know how to play it. And the third is use our strengths of democracy, of media, of various voices to your own advantage. The Chinese in their negotiations, and Raj will bear me out, at the border, at the LAC, when the border personnel meetings happen, always complain about Indian media. Why can't you control Indian media? Because in their book, media can be controlled because it's all Sarkari media. Whereas we should be saying, our military and our diplomats should be saying, we are a democracy, we have several voices. They will write what they want. We don't control them. And when you do that, they are afraid of it. The Chinese are actually afraid of the different opinions that India has. So you have to play that game. And it's a game that can be played beautifully if you concentrate on it. But we have not given enough thought. The British Army is 90,000 strong. It has an information brigade, a separate brigade called 77 Chindits Brigade. It's got an information brigade from 2012. Only job they have is to direct the narrative in favor of the UK military. We don't have that. Like you said, DG Stratcom, Deputy National Security Advisor Stratcom. Why can't we have that? Who gets all these ecosystem which is there, which is developed by the young people in various languages, can be co-opted in doing all this. It started doing after Sindhur, but I think it's again slowed down, which is a pity.
Thank you so much for that. I really
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful insights. This is one session which has many dimensions and shouldn't have been a single session because there are a lot of thoughts that branch out. Thank you, Nitin ji.